What up? This is Greg Grease. You're listening to Local Vibes.
Welcome to the studio, Greg. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good.
Yeah. So let's talk about the music you just performed recently. So what was that like? What did we hear?
Yeah, so I performed a few new tracks, Tightrope, Long Day, and what's the name of the last song? Can't Call It.
Mm-hmm. So Tightrope, that it was just recently released.
Correct.
So tell me more about like the creation of Tightrope, what went into it, and what you kind of pulled from. What were the influences behind that one in particular?
Yeah, I think really the influences I pulled from that one are the influences that I pulled from my whole project. I think where I'm at musically currently is just like really making stuff that I love. And so I used to love listening to like Quasimodo and like some different stuff, Mad Lib a lot. And so for that one, I was kind of channeling that vibe. I wanted it to be something that was fun because the content itself might not be as fun. So I wanted to create a contrast, have something that feels a little bit lighthearted, but still got that nice slap to it.
Yeah. So you mentioned Madlib and Quasimodo. So when you're looking at older producers like that and newer ones that are blowing up, like DJ Mustard or Metro, what are some newer producers that you kind of really are attuned to or you check up more than others?
Man, that's a great question. Knowledge is always going crazy. Who else? I mean, it's a lot of my guys. Like Mike is just a incredibly talented producer. This cat, King Michael Coy, who's a legend, Twin Cities legend. Simon, Fire. Who else? Man, I think that's probably my best answer right now.
No, yeah. And Mike who's another very well known producer artist of the Twin Cities. You had mentioned before the show that you met in Rhymesayers, and from there you've been able to develop this very professional relationship with amazing music behind it.
Yeah.
So tell me more about Mike, the music that you've been able to create together. When it comes to Zulu to today.
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm not going to go too deep down the wormhole, but me and Mike, we met at the producer showcase at Fifth Element, back when Fifth Element was open. At the time, Mike was a rapper, so he had beats and rhymes, and he wasn't singing the sweet serenades yet. So yeah, I mean, we got together. He was producing tracks for me. He's also an incredibly talented videographer. I don't know how many people know that. Arguably as good as his music. And so he was doing some video work for me. He did my Cream Dreams video at the time. And then he was producing some tracks for me. And then I remember I went over his house one day and he played me this track where he was singing on it. And I was like, what is this? Mm-hmm. I was like, you need to do this more. He's like, for real? So yeah, I mean, I've been blessed to be able to see his whole journey of becoming this artist that he is now. We had a band together for many years, making some real Afrodelic type tracks, some real Minneapolis sound, funky, soulful, with some other members as well. So yeah, I mean, we've just been collaborative partners, friends, collaborators for 10 years now. So at this point, it's just real organic. He's on the album. Yeah.
Yeah, and yourself, you're a very talented musician, composer, and multidisciplinary creative. And listening to this stuff, I've been able to tell, the very clear influence of, Betty Davis, Funkadelic of Parliament. So when you're listening to those people, what were you kind of pulling from them or taking like kind of creative inspiration from when you were creating this very funky, Afrocentric sound?
Man, I mean, firstly, thank you for the compliments. What did I take from it? I mean, I think there's a lot of different things that I take from a lot of the funk stuff. I think the visual element is a big piece of it for me. Like, I've always been super inspired by like the visuals of funk. But even before I was a rapper, before I made beats, I was a drummer and I was in funk bands. What we call black rock and roll at the time, what the industry might call funk. And so, yeah, I mean, I've always been, born and bred on some real funky type stuff. My family, came up in the Minneapolis scene making funky jams. Yeah, so that's always been my thing. I think I kind of came up in the era of like boom bap and hip hop and more soulful stuff. But I've always been trying to bring it to that funk element.
Yeah. So what is your opinion on the sound that hip hop has kind of grown into? Because during that boom bap, the bling era, what what do you like most about what we've kind of got into? Very nicely produced, very abstract ambient kind of stuff that's been
Yeah.
blowing up recently.
Excuse me. I mean, I think right now there's just so much variety. I think that's the most beautiful part about it is that you can really get any flavor that you want. And I also really love the accessibility where anybody can really do it nowadays. Like when I was coming up, you had to have $1,000 machine to even be able to start making tracks. Like people weren't really making them on a computer like that. And so you had to have the equipment to even get in the game. And I feel like now that the equipment is a lot more readily available, people can make stuff on their phones. Like we're getting to find true talent. You know what I mean? We're finding people that are in their bedroom making fire. Like I used to teach over at Slam Academy, and I had students that were like 12, 13, that their beats were like way better than mine, for sure. You know what I mean? And I'm like, they're just in the crib cooking. It's like that's their video game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, I just love the massive explosion of it and the variety.
Mm-hmm. I'm. It's good that you brought up your family earlier because you come from a very musical family, with many members specializing in a number of instruments, the flute, all sorts of things. And so, how is growing up in such an environment? How does that continually impact this career that you've developed over time?
Yeah, man. I mean, it's a lot of the reason why I am the way I am. I grew up with my uncles with studios and instruments, and they would let me be in there, which is a big thing. Like I know some people that with family members with studios, but they weren't allowed to be in there. I could be in there messing with stuff. I had something to aspire to, seeing plaques up on the wall, stuff like that. And then really, I mean, my foundation was in the church. So like a lot of my family members, once they got a little older and have families and transition out of their careers as musician, they continue playing in the church. And so, that's where I really got started playing drums and doing that whole thing. And so, yeah, I mean, I was just kind of born and bred. Like my dad isn't a musician, but very much loves music. And so he would break tracks down for me. Like he had one of them like 500 CD booklets, like the big leather joints, is before y'all's time.
Yeah.
And you would just flip through them joints. Sorry. And I would bring them to school. Everybody wanted my CDs. I had all the CDs. So, I just grew up always listening to music. Music was always on. My dad would be like, listen to this. This is Jay Dilla. I think you'll like this. Like, he put me on stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like, I would go to school and be like, you heard of Dead Prez? And my friends would be like, nah. I'd be like, listen to this. My dad played me this. Oh. And there would be like songs about how school is horrible.
Yeah, it's like, don't go to school.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So I was like, yeah, this is it. Like, so yeah, I mean, it was always like a trading card. It was like a badge, a merit badge. Yeah, that's just a part of my DNA.
Yeah. What other, I guess, producers did your dad really enjoy listening to other than Jay Dilla?
Man, my pops, what he would do is every paycheck he would go to Electric Fetus and just listen to the CDs that came out and then buy whatever they had. And so he listened to everything, but he really loved Dre. He really loved No ID because he loved Common. The Roots he really loved, so Questlove, and Q-Tip because he loved Tribe Called Quest, De La Soul, Prince Paul. I mean, the list goes on. He really, really loved rap music, and so that was his thing, like all of it.
Yeah. So when it comes to like regional sounds or just kind of people that kind of embrace a specific kind of sound of hip hop, like the Backpackers, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any specific like regions that you kind of like would you say are your favorite more? Like are you more of a hip hop from the East Coast, West Coast, backpack, or gangster?
I would say it's a multi-tier answer because I would say it has to do with region and time. So like when I was first coming up, obviously East Coast was everything. Like that's what it was. And so, like Nas-Illmatic is the Bible, Holy Bible. You know what I mean? But then at the same time, you had Tupac, who was West Coast out. You know what I mean? So I wouldn't say there was really a specific region, but I was really also really heavy into Outkast. And so I feel like they kind of ushered in, you know, a Southern sound at the time when it wasn't really going on. So, I mean, it's a tough question. I'm a true head. So, like, I love East Coast. I love Southern, and I love West Coast, I would say. So really, that's kind of all of it.
Yeah.
And that's not to sleep on our own sound, too, though, because we also have a Midwest sound that really was developed, I would say, over the late 90s and the early 2000s as well. So, you know, shout out I Self Divine and the Micronauts. They're also one of my biggest influences as well.
Yeah. And, you know, before you rapped, you know, you also created instrumentals for your friends and collaborators. So what were your beginnings as a producer? And was this transition between producing and rapping a difficult one?
Well, like I said, I started out drumming, and I was in bands. And then when I was in high school, my friends rapped. Everybody rapped. Still everybody raps. But when I was in high school, everybody rapped. Everybody loved to battle rap, freestyle. Freestyling was a really big deal. So I would freestyle all the time, but I was definitely not a rapper. I did not sell myself as a rapper. People, whenever I freestyle, people always like, man, you should try to rap. Like, nah, I'm good. I'm a drummer. Then once I graduated, I really started hanging out with a lot of rappers. They needed beats. I was a drummer, and so I was always kind of drawn to producing. So I got into producing. My uncle Norman, he had like a production studio, so he had tons of keyboards and beat machines. So he gave me a little beat machine. So I started using like this little Korg beat machine. So that's really how I started making tracks, and it was just a drum machine. Like there was no other instruments on it. So I had the headphones and just be like making a bunch of different drum patterns on it. And then from there, yeah, I mean, I was in a rap group called The Usual Suspects, and I produced for them, and we performed a lot. And my guys always encouraged me to rhyme. My guy Free One, rest in peace, he really was on me like, look, man, you should really rhyme. I'll be Dooley Devious, you be Greasy Greg. I was like, that's kind of a hard name. So maybe. So I started to consider it, you know what I mean? And he slowly will push it a little more and more. And then I started to rhyme, and basically what happened was I started rhyming in the group, and those guys lifed. And so they stopped writing rhymes, but I had all these rhymes. I was new out the gate. So I'm writing all this new stuff. They're like, I got to go to work, bro. And so I started filling in tracks, just like adding more verses. And then next thing you know, I had a bunch of solo songs. And I was like, oh, and everybody's like, you should just release that. Like, it's cool, you know? Mm-hmm. So that's how I became a solo artist. It was completely by accident. Yeah. It was not on purpose. Yeah.
So does the name Greg Grease come from the producing, or does it come from the rapping?
It comes from the lifestyle, for sure. Like I said, I was Greasy Greg. My guy was Dooley Devious. We were some real grimy, greasy street kids at the time. So yeah, it only fit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And, you know, being able to kind of cultivate your own sound through your influences and people that you've worked with, you know, you've been able to attract a large number of listeners, you know, through these Afro spiritual melodies. And tell me more about being featured on The Current's The Scouting Report, because it's a very well-known report, you know, done by The Current, where they look at the most, you know, artists that have been blowing up recently, or been making a lot of big waves within the local scene. So how is that like, and how has it kind of impacted your career in any way?
How's it impacted my career? Well, I mean, they just reached out to me and said that they would like to feature me, which is great. I love anytime, any opportunity the Current wants to show any sort of love. Like you said, they have a huge audience. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm super grateful to be able to be on their platform. I've been on there a couple times, but not in that way, not in that same way. Kind of like here, you know, I was here with my band. It's a little bit different when I'm by myself. So, yeah, I mean, I think right now I'm just in the process of putting myself back out there as a solo artist and really starting to release music again. So I think that personally what it helped me with is it gave me the little energy boost to keep going, to put this album out.
Have you been able to meet any artists that you haven't really heard of through this connection at all, or like people that you've been kind of interested in potentially working with in the future?
Through the current connection, or
Yeah, through the scouting report, seeing other people that have also kind of.
oh no, I'll be honest, no.
Yeah.
I mean, there's mad people I would like to work with, but not that I've necessarily seen through the scouting report. But there's some new local artists that are fire out here for sure, like Ricky Monique, super fire artist that I would love to work with. Who else? Papa Mbai, really dope. Yeah, I mean, I'm always looking to build in the community. You know, I'm a very community-based artist, so I'm always down to build with other creatives in the space. Not that I found them from the scouting report, but there's a lot of dope artists in the Twin Cities. So,
Yeah, and it's good that you touch on community because you're not only involved with the community musically, but kind of socially too. You've co-founded the Solomon Hughes Senior Golf Academy.
yeah.
And what inspired you to start this academy, and how have you witnessed benefiting, Black and brown children, firsthand?
Oh man, that could be a long answer. What inspired me to create the program? I mean, really, I've always come up in the community, grassroots. I'm a child of community programming. Like all summer, I was at camp. I've been to Boys and Girls Club, YMCA, Urban League, church camp, U of M camp, St. Thomas. Like, I've been to them all. Mm-hmm. And so I really benefit from that as a young person. It kept me out of a lot of trouble, giving me something to do in the summertime. And then also during the school year, I was after school kid. I was African drumming after school. I was computer program class. My parents just kept me as busy as possible because they knew that my hands had to stay active. Mm-hmm. And so, being cut from that, it's important for me to carry that on. My family, they're all educators, community activists, community workers. And so, it's in my DNA. It's just kind of like creating art or anything else. It's just like breathing. It's not really something that I'm like, well, I got to do this thing. It's just I'm always doing the thing. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, the program itself, was inspired by Solomon Hughes Sr., who's a pioneer in the game and broke the color barrier in the PGA. And he lived in the Twin Cities, and he actually broke the color barrier in the Twin Cities in St. Paul in 1952. And so just think about that. The PGA was white only. They actually called it Caucasian only until 1952. And so I think it's important to highlight that type of stuff still and tell those stories and realize, like, I mean, that's our parents' age, our grandparents' age, that's not that long ago, right? And so, that was really what inspired the program, was the legacy of that. Solomon also was an educator and taught lots and lots of Black folks how to play golf. He taught them over at Hiawatha. He taught Joe Louis, the famous boxer, how to golf. Really? And so he's really a legend in a lot of different ways. And so the legacy of teaching, the legacy of breaking down doors, these are all things that I just felt in alignment with. And so, I never really even played golf that much. My grandfather was a golfer. And so I had clubs around, and like I did first tee. Like I said, I did all the camps. So I did first tee once during the Tiger Woods era. But I didn't really have an intimate connection with golf until I was told this story by my co-founder, John. He told me about this story, and I was just really inspired by it. And since then, I'm now golfed out. But, it's all about just creating access and opportunities in the golf space. There's a lot of opportunities and a lot of money that's flowing around there for young people. And so, I'm all about creating opportunity for young folks. So that's what the program's about.
Yeah. That's great. Have you also kind of tried to create opportunities within the musical sphere as well, whether it be teaching young boys and girls how to make music, how to produce, how to play instruments?
Most def. Working as a teaching artist. I've done work over at Culture Club, which is always a really good time. I taught over at Slam Academy. Yeah, I mean, I think it's all about giving back and keeping it going. I come from a culture of people bringing people up. you know, having, you know, a OG teaching the YG, like, this is how you do things appropriately. And I think that that's really important for people to be able to truly have a respect for the culture, and not just something that is something that, you know, is for the internet or whatever, but really like understanding it as a culture. And so, yeah, you know, I'm always been brought up in that like teach others type of vibe. So it's an automatic thing in the music space as well. For a little while, I was working as a consultant with Cedar Cultural Center, actually, as an artist consultant, doing the same thing, talking about how we can create more access for local artists. So, yeah, you know, I'm all about, you know, if I get my foot in the door, we all in that, John, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, I want to learn more about what you've been up to recently. You know, you've announced a new album that is soon to be hopefully on the way, titled Mirage. So can you tell us about as much as you can at this time about the album and the significance of the title?
Yeah, I mean, Mirage is just what it is, right? Like, it's something that you think you see, but it's not really what it is. And so, you know, for me, Mirage is about my journey to self-realization and around, you know, barriers that I was creating for myself based on insecurities and based on ego. And so it's really an ego death type of situation, but it's also about illusion. And so, you know, throughout the album, there might be some stuff where you're like, is he being literal or is he not being literal? I don't know. Is this line a literal line? It's subtle, but the idea of it is that, you know, nothing is what it seems. And so we should approach everything in the world as that, even things that we appreciate. Yeah. So, yeah, that's kind of the theme for the album. It's finished. We'll be releasing some new songs. One of the songs that I perform, Long Day, is an unreleased one. So actually, it'll probably be released live through you all before I release the actual track. So.
Nice. You know, taking in your experiences as a musician and as an active community member, has it ever been difficult at all to balance these two worlds?
I mean, life is a difficult balance, right? So, I mean, it's a balance that I choose to take on. I'd rather be balancing that than balancing 9 to 5 and, I don't know, something else I don't want to do. You know what I mean? Like, I think we pick and we choose, you know? So, yeah and no. I mean, it's just a part of the game.
Yeah. Well, do you have anything else to share with our listeners? Anything coming up? Any performances possibly?
So, yeah, you know, I have a few upcoming gigs. I have a show August 10th at Ice House. That's for Totally Gross National Product, their yearly party. And then I have a show August 17th, and that is for the High Respects yearly party, and that's at the James J. Hill House. And then from there, I have a show September 28th at the Ice House again, and that is for Sean Anonymous' anniversary of his vinyl release. And so, yeah, I'm starting to do shows again, putting myself back out there. So, yeah, love to see you join us in the crowd while I'm on the stage.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and yeah, we'll see you later.
Cool. Appreciate you.